Hi, welcome back to the AITX Community Podcast. I'm your host, Jake O'Shea. This is the show where we go deep with some of the most interesting AI engineers, entrepreneurs, researchers, investors, and operators across Texas. Our mission is to pull back the curtain on what's really going on with AI in a way that's accessible and engaging for anyone that's excited about the future of this technology. We specifically focus on Texas because we believe that the Texas engineering community is seriously underrated. People here are building incredible products and solving complex technical challenges. And the hope is that this podcast helps shine the light on some of the incredible work that's being done here in Texas. This week's episode features Rick Boone. Rick's an engineer, an executive, and now a full-time venture capital investor. Rick's had an incredible career at some of the most iconic tech companies in the world, including an engineering role at Facebook in the early 2010s. He then joined Uber shortly after, where he worked his way up from a mid-level engineer all the way to being a strategic advisor to the company's head of engineering. And then he moved on from Uber to join Carta, a unicorn tech startup, where he served as vice president of engineering. While at Carta, Rick began angel investing in startups and is now spending most of his time as an investor, both personally and through Antler, where we work closely together. Rick shares some wild stories in this podcast, including a story at Uber where they almost actually deleted the entire driver and rider database. They didn't, thankfully, but listen to the episode to hear that story. It's pretty wild. Beyond his prolific career, Rick is one of the most genuine and thoughtful humans I've had the pleasure of speaking with. I've seen this firsthand from working with him at Antler and also watched the way that he works with founders here. You'll see it come through in the podcast as well. Having Rick in this ecosystem makes Texas a better place for engineers and for technical founders. So I'm really excited to share some of his story with the rest of the world. And now, without further ado, please enjoy this deep dive with Rick Boone. So we're live.
Cool.
Rick Boone, welcome to the show.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks for hopping on.
Of course.
So to start, I always like to ask guests to kind of tell their own story with technology, AI, etc. So I guess would love to hear kind of a little bit of your story growing up. What initially drew you to kind of technology, building things, engineering, and kind of how did that lead you into your professional career?
Yeah. So funny enough, I was just mentioning literally to you in the hallway like 2 minutes ago. I grew up in New York City. And so that's relevant because my mother worked as a computer operations manager for the Department of City Planning for the city of New York. And so this is late 70s, early 80s. And so she was running the team that used to run they used to be called computer rooms, and just like massive mainframes using punch cards. And they were storing all the zoning data for all of New York City. So if you were like, oh, I want to like build or like develop, you have to go to the Department of City Planning, and all the data was on these massive mainframes. So she ran this computer room. So A, she's my hero. And B, that was my first exposure to technology computing. And so she used to bring me to her job. And so, from 3, 4, 5, like super young, I would go and hang out in these massive rooms of mainframes. And she would like let me like sit on her lap and like put the punch cards into the machine to like the computer and like put my name and things like that. And then she had an office set aside from the actual computer room, which used to be really cool. I mean, they're essentially now just data centers, but this was like in a building. And I remember they did it once on Mad Men, like showed like what it was like. It was like in an actual office. It just was a set aside room, and it was like raised floor, kept cold, like steel and tiles all over.
And like 24 gigabytes of storage.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Loud, just like it was actually really cool. And I feel like you probably never find one now. I mean, probably maybe in like either a fab or a data center would be the closest thing, but they probably wouldn't have the same sense of just like people in the office also just working around them. Anyway, so in her set aside cubicle, I would also just like play like the really early games on DOS and like, Windows, like Windows 3.1 games and things like that. So like tic-tac-toe and all these games she would set up for me. And so I never knew a world without computers. And I feel very lucky and like, hey, like I said, like she is my hero. She's one of them. But one thing that I didn't even realize in my life, and that people that like I now explain to people, I'm like, like this was a woman leading a computer operations team in the late 70s, like in New York City. Like that's like now it's sort of like that would still be like something like, oh wow, that's cool. And I didn't think about that at first. It's like, oh yeah, my mom was like running this team. And so that's how I started. And then like as I was getting older, I was like begging my mom, like the biggest thing I could ever get was a compact. I don't know if you remember like the computer brand compact, but
I remember the brand.
okay,
Yeah.
yeah. And so I wanted my own PC, and like I begged and begged and begged, and I finally got it. And I used to just like hang out in all the like BBSs and like hacking and freaking boards. And even at my high school, I used to like log into shell and like just play around with Linux commands. And so like I just was always immersed in that. And then I went to a specialized math and science high school, and there really was no other pathway that I thought of beyond computing. Like the same way that I grew up just surrounded by them, I never thought of doing anything else. The only other thing I thought of was going into pre-law. Um, but I still like I ended up choosing computing anyway. So did computer science at USC in Los Angeles. And this is in 99. So I went out to college in 99, computer science. And I always tell people like this is before it was like now it's like the pathway towards like financial security. And like now it's overtaking like, law and medicine is like
Consulting, IB.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like back then it was still I joke, but I'm like, it was still like a dorky domain. Like it wasn't the cool thing that it is now. Like everyone's in computer science. Like although now that's actually changing again, which is interesting. But uh, back then it was a lot of people that were doing it for just because like this is what I love to do. As a matter of fact, at USC at the time, computer science, like my degree is not an actual, it's given by the School of Letters, Arts and Sciences because it was still a holdover from the 70s when computer science was first started. It was part of like the letters, arts and sciences schools, not the engineering school. And they changed it like after I graduated, but that's just sort of how early things were. So anyway,
Real quick before we move on, what drew you to USC specifically? Like, did you have an affinity to the school or?
funny enough, so I wanted to. There were a few criteria that I had. So I wanted to try to stay in a big city. There's a funny story that led me to realize I couldn't go to school in New York. So actually, the couple things there. One, actually, let me back up. It was less I'm going to USC. It was more a few like so many other things had gotten like canceled out, and so. Like I mentioned, I went to a specialized math and science high school in New York City, which tends to be a feeder for the Ivies in the Northeast, and hyper competitive. Like just, I mean, it really is. It's some of the smartest kids in the country in New York City, but it like hyper competitive.
Yeah.
And just give you an example of the world, like the environment of it. I remember being in American history class right after one of the sessions of the SATs. And this is back when it was just 1600 was the max score. And so around the country, I think there's like on average, like 95 to 100 kids, they get like a perfect score for every session. And just coincidentally, my last name is Boone. So I'm like in the first row, second seat. But the seat in front of me and the seat behind me both have perfect scores. So like that's the level of like where I'm at school. And like everyone is Harvard, you're Princeton, Harvard, you're Princeton. Like you're going somewhere, Northeast, Ivy. And I was in that and it's very seductive to be in that hyper competitive, totally buy in. Like I took the SATs 3 times because I was like, my scores are not good enough. And they were pretty good, and I just like they were not good enough.
They weren't
like
perfect.
they weren't. That's
Yeah.
when it's literally randomly the person in front of you, and the person behind you gets perfect. Like whatever you get, you're literally like, well, I'm not of this crowd, and I want to be, and it's just that's the environment, and so I had decided sort of early on, like I don't want to keep doing this. Like I got to get out of this.
The rat race.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was just like I loved learning, and I also love the competitive nature of it, but there was something about it. I was just like, I gotta get out of this. And so like I sort of like blocked off a lot of the Ivies in the Northeast schools. And then I was thinking about going to school in New York, and I went to tour NYU with my parents. And I don't know if you know how NYU is set up, but it's within the city. It's
Yeah,
within
it's like
Manhattan.
across downtown.
Yeah, exactly. Excuse me. And so I was on tour with my parents, and they split the prospective students, apart from the parents. You do separate tours. And so I went to school in downtown Manhattan. And so me and my friends I went to high school in downtown Manhattan. So we'd always like walk up to the village after school and just like hang out and do whatever, like, 14, 15, 6-year-old kids do in Manhattan, hang out, run around. And so I'm on this tour at NYU, like walking through the campus, and I'm like, oh, I've tried to sneak into that bar with my fake ID. I've been into that restaurant with my friends for 2 hours after school. And it just was like, I've done this. Like I can't go to here. So too familiar. So I like wipe that out. And then I just was like, I want to go to but I do want to be in a major city. I do want to try to be around like energy. I want to have a good like college experience. I want to get away from New York. I want to have like the full experience. And honestly, USC like accepted me. I had a half scholarship, and I was like, this feels right. So I did it, and I actually did it sight unseen. Like I had not seen the campus before.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
But Los Angeles, it checks the boxes.
Exactly. And it was like, it was different enough that I knew it would have a really unique experience, but it was similar enough that it wasn't like I was going to like University of Indiana, and I'd be like, oh, like I'm gonna freak out. Like I've never been in like the rural environment. And the funny thing is, like, despite going sight unseen, I would totally do it. Like I loved USC, and I still do. Like I would totally do it again. Like great program, great people, great experience.
So you go to school at USC. This is right during kind of the .com boom. And I guess maybe a little bit into the bust as well. Like
Yes.
Popping of the bubble.
Mm-hmm.
So going to school for a technical career at that time, seeing all the excitement and then like the trough of disillusionment, what was that like? What were kind of the pressures under you when you were looking for a job, studying, etc.? Also, you could.
Oh, yeah. Did everything else come in?
Yeah. We're still coming in good. Just want to make sure that you're on camera.
Okay. Oh, actually, I couldn't see before. Okay, perfect. Okay, cool. So funny enough, like I mentioned, I had gone into computer science just because like I didn't know anything else. I was like, this is just what I'm going to do. Mm-hmm. And part of that also led to I didn't really have a sense of like, okay, I'm going to USC to get comp sci degree, that I'm going to maybe either go into a master's program or I'm going to go to this company, that company. Like it was very much just like, I'm going to college. I have to study something. I love computers. I'm studying computers. And then graduation day happened. It was like, oh shit, now what? Like, okay, like what do I do now? Like I literally didn't know what I wanted to do. And I remember like senior year, I was talking to friends that were getting like acceptances to master's programs. And I was like, well, you guys are still going on? Like what? Like I had not, that wasn't in my mind. Like I just hadn't thought about that. And so I say that to say that like my sense of the larger world and like the job market and like, what am I going to do after this wasn't really part of my thinking. I think nowadays, if I were to go into school now, it very much would be. But back then, again, it was much more it was much more a thing of love. It just was like, I just love this. And so like, I'm just going to go like do this thing I love. And I guess I'll figure the rest out when I get out. It wasn't super pragmatic. And then, I mean, luckily it is the degree that which And to be fair, I think I had a guttural sense of like, this is a degree that like I can figure something out.
Yeah.
It's not like, oh, I mean, I don't want to like slag off any other degree, but it's not a degree where it's like, oh, if you have that, you haven't really planned things out. Like you could end up in trouble. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, like I think there's enough that like I have some slack, some leeway to like figure out what I really want to do. What I can tell you about the market at the time is that this is my sense, like what my experience was. Geographically, I was like, I told myself I wanted to go back to New York City. And then I started looking at like job listings in the market in New York City, and it was nothing like it is now. Like it used to be pretty much all it was for computer scientists was maintaining like Haskell systems at like a bank from the 70s. Like it really wasn't anything innovative. It was like back room office. Honestly, it was maintaining the systems that my mom had worked on. It was like that kind of, it was still that sort of like they hadn't innovated. Like all the innovation, all of it was in California. New York was just more like maintenance technology. And so I decided just to stay in California. And I didn't really feel a panic or anything because again, I wasn't looking at like the market in a very pragmatic way. It was much more about like what I want to do. And so I just was like, I need to figure out what I want to do to keep just doing the things I love. And so I decided to stay in LA and I decided to go to web hosting, look at web hosting companies because web hosting companies, which really there aren't any that are around any longer, but at the time they offer you, if you worked at them, you could have like your pick of like front end, back end, technical support, like customer support. Like you could do all these different things. And it was very much like you could help design the websites on the front end. You could sort of work on the servers in the back. You could just sort of do frontline technical support, which is actually what I did. Like my first job out of college, which I don't talk about a lot. It's not out of like shame or anything. It's just like, oh, like I just don't talk about it. But my first job out of college was technical support representative, level 1 at iPowerWeb on the phones, like, hello, like, welcome to iPowerWeb. Like, what can we help you with your website today? And it'd be everything from like billing didn't go through to like their web development framework was broken or like they couldn't find a file and they uploaded it and things like that. And it did what I hoped. It exposed me to all facets of I wouldn't really call it a technology shop, but a business that was focused on computing.
Yeah.
Um,
Technology company.
yes.
Yeah.
And I found myself just focusing and being pulled towards the command line all the time, just like in high school. And then in college, we had to submit our code and our homework and labs through command line, and that was a requirement. Like you had to submit through the shell. And I was always like hacking on the shell, like jumping around into servers and like directories I wasn't supposed to be in, like trying to hack them, blah 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 blah. And
Just for fun.
Huh?
Just for fun.
Just for fun, yeah. Because I just love being on the command line. And I just ended up doing that while I was tech support. Like, so tech support one, like you're just intake, but I would end up like working to solve the problem on the phone. Like you're supposed to pass it off to the junior sysadmins, and I would just start doing it myself. And so then I switched over to become a junior sysadmin, level 1. Well, junior system, which is sort of implied level 1. And that was the start of my real career as a like engineer. Was at iPowerWeb doing junior sysadmin work. I work with the other sysadmins and just relearning how to maintain systems and keep things reliable and how to use Linux. And well, I knew how to use Linux, but using it like, to serve customers, like how to like handle storage and multiple, like hundreds of accounts on one server and like general like system admin work.
Yeah. So that first role led to what I would call a pretty like prolific career in tech at some very recognizable companies, Meta, Uber, or I guess Facebook back then. Carta. So I guess tell me the story of, I think the first one on that list that you joined was Facebook.
Yep.
In pretty early days for Facebook.
Yep.
So tell me a little bit about kind of what led to that role or what kind of drew you there, and what was it like back then?
Yeah.
Right? Back when it was still Facebook, not the Facebook. I
Yeah.
don't think it was that early.
It was
Pretty soon after.
It was soon after, I think. It was 2011. I don't know the exact date when Mark got the advice to change it, but I would imagine it wasn't that soon after. But the way I landed there was, so I was still in Los Angeles and I left Our Power Web and I left web hosting in general and moved to working so in Los Angeles, a lot of the technology scene was focused around media and entertainment. Understandably, it's Los Angeles. And it was actually it wasn't as innovative as SF at the time. This is like mid 2000s. But it was still like a good, enjoyable scene. And I've actually compared, this is sort of an aside, I've compared Los Angeles at that time to Austin. I see similar, like Austin right now, I see similar elements of the community where it's like, we're sort of a second city. We do have solid products and companies here and people here, but we're a second city. And so the sense of community and connection and like guidance and assistance tends to be much higher and much more personalized. And people truly care about like, hey, like, do you need help with this? Like, really care about building a community.
Positive sum.
Yeah.
As opposed to zero sum.
Yes, exactly. It's not as transactional. It's much more just like, hey, like, let's rise the tide of the city itself. And so, in any case, so I was working at this entertainment company called Buzz Media, not BuzzFeed.
Okay.
Buzz Media. They changed their name a couple of times, but it was Buzz Media. And they initially were doing like this social networking site around media. So it was like, so this is like MySpace had started in LA.
Yeah.
And so this is like around the time of MySpace's dominance. And Buzz Media's thing was like, hey, like you have your profile, but it's focused around like bands or musicians that you like or like celebrities that you like, things like that. And so it started there and then they started acquiring blogs. And so like Britney Spears' blog, the Kardashians, when they were blowing up, like a lot of the LA, that like Lindsay Lohan, like that whole scene in LA, like a lot of their blogs and media were on Buzz Media. So I was working there and my manager at the time, who hired me, he left. He was recruited by Facebook. I can't remember well, yeah, it would have been 2010. He was recruited in 2010. And I'm just going to say it was a very large coincidence that roughly a year later, I got a call from Facebook.
Total coincidence.
Total coincidence. Yeah. I don't know if the timing meant anything. I don't know. I'm just like, I'm just putting out facts. But yeah, roughly like a little over a year later, I was reached out to by Facebook. And they asked me, hey, like, would you be interested in working here, working on, just systems engineering, systems administration? And I mean, I joke, but it wasn't really a joke at the time. I was like, do you guys have the right person? Like, who do you, like, you must be thinking of someone else. And I really did. I truly felt like that. Like, I truly felt like you've gotten something wrong. And they're like, no. And they're like, we'd love to have you up. And, I did the phone screen and they're like, we'd love to have you up. And I went up for the interview and like throughout the process, I continued to think like something's wrong. Like they don't have the right person.
Were they like hot then? Like you could tell they were growing
Yes.
quick and were kind of the next MySpace or overtaking MySpace?
Yes.
Yeah.
They were. And what I remember more was Mark's, as he is today, actually more so then, but he's still like he's doing things even up to the last 24 hours that are like, he has a strong opinion about things. He's going to go do what he feels is right for the world. Like, but he was very vociferous about the idea of identity and being who you are in all facets, in the burgeoning world of social media and social networking. And it was like, super inspiring to me because as a like someone that loved computing and could see where things are going, I just was like, and also like just love humans. Like it really resonated with how I saw the world. And so um, they were hot. I think he had already gotten the offer for $1 billion from Viacom, I believe. Um, but it was nowhere. I mean, it was still this sort of upstarty, like rambunctious. It was big, but it wasn't what we know of as like Facebook or Meta.
But it was cool.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I believe I know we were past just the college members. Like you no longer had to have a college email address to join, but it wasn't too far past that.
Yeah.
So I got an offer. Literally up to my first day and past that, like the imposter syndrome did not go away. I mean, like it really never went away until like I'll get to this later in as I talk through my career, but like it didn't really go away till I got to Uber. But yeah, like I was working there and it was super exciting. I felt like a fish out of water. Beyond just the imposter syndrome, it wasn't like an order of magnitude jump. It was like a triple order of magnitude jump. It was just, I mean, literally in some
like
ways.
Intensity and complexity.
Yeah.
You had to obviously move to Palo Alto.
Yeah. I moved to San Francisco, but yes, like I commuted every day down on the Caltrain.
Nice.
Yeah. I got an apartment by 4th and King in San Francisco, which
right by the Caltrain entrance. Yeah.
Yeah. And once again, like just sort of not, it wasn't intentional, but you know, that part of San Francisco and where the Caltrain is in that area is just sort of like the center of, especially at the time, like center of startup, center of VC, like that's where South Park is. That's where Antler's new office is in San Francisco. And yes, I was in the midst of all this, was commuting every day. And it was still, I joined, the offices were no longer the separated offices on University Avenue, because that was their first set of offices, was just like not ramshackle, but like random assortment of like offices around University Avenue, which is in downtown Palo Alto.
Yeah, across from Stanford.
Yes. Yeah. When I joined, we had like an official set of offices, and they were big. They were like two or three large buildings at the very, very end of University Avenue. And I joined in like August, and it's funny because a lot of what Mark is doing right now with the AI hiring and going after, basically just like, we're going to do this right now.
Going to war.
Yeah. That's where I'm going. And like Carthage must perish. And like his sort of like, at all costs, we will win this battle and this war mentality. I joined, I think it was like August of 2011, and Google had announced, which I feel like they probably would never do this again, and I feel like others have realized never do this strategically. They announced the first day that Google Plus was going to start. So you basically gave one of the most focused people in like American business history a date by which he needs to destroy you. And so like, and I think it was like September 31st or October 1st or something like that, 2011.
It's like right after you joined.
Yeah. And so like I joined right in the middle end of this, and he put the company into lockdown. And if like, I mean, for anyone that doesn't know, like lockdown was just all hands on deck and no other work gets done other than like the work dedicated to this set of goals. And like everything else stops. And this is it. And like, whether you're in legal, design, product, engineering, it doesn't matter. You're focused on like this 1 or 7 or 10 or 20 goals that have been set by the company. And it's also cool because like, you could do it, like a team might be like, oh, like we have to get this out by the quarter, we're going to go into lockdown. But it's just sort of like a hyper focus, like the switch is on, let's go. And he had a counter above his office that literally was like counting down to the day that Google had announced. And it was a literal like above his office. He never had an office, it was like a sort of almost like this room, just like it was called the aquarium, um, all glass. And it was just a counter above that. And yeah, I joined in the middle of that and it was hyper intensive, hyper intense. Um, and it just taught me a lot about like focus. And it's one of those things that like when I joined, Google had already, I used to be obsessed with Google. Like, I mean, I would just get into these like 20 comment long like debates about Google versus Apple back in the day, like when Android was coming out. Like I used to be obsessed with Google and their philosophy and like don't be evil. Like I was such a Google fanboy. And so when I joined, I just was like, this is never like if they've not that I thought that Google Plus was going to be like a world changing thing, but it just was like you're going up against Google like this, and it seeing how it came to fruition, like internally the lockdown, and seeing that like if you give people a focus and like rally them and help them understand the strategy and are like, just go do your job and let's get this done. Like anything's possible. And that sort of echoed throughout my time at Facebook. That's one of the things I've taken away from it is like Mark is probably to me, one of the reasons I have appreciated him so much is the understanding of culture and rallying people around a focused goal that like if you can do that nothing is impossible, like that, like really like being dropped into that and then feeling it for the next 3 years is always stayed with me.
Culture, and then it sounds like alignment too.
Yes.
There's not political groups advocating for one thing or another. It's like, no, this is what we're aligned around.
Yes. And no matter what you're doing, and like that's one of the things that like, and I think about and execute on this and give advice on this a lot. It's like it doesn't really matter what you're doing, like as long as you're aligned with your work and what you're delivering towards a larger goal, then like that's what matters. And you have to understand like what your inputs or outputs, how they are translating to that ultimate thing. Like if you don't understand it, then you'll be lost and you'll be frustrated. Your morale will go down. Your team's morale will go down. But if you understand, like if everyone understands, like you really have this sense of like nothing is impossible.
Nice. What were some of the like problems that you tackled while you were there? Like what does engineering challenges at Facebook look like in those days?
So one I remember, and this was awesome. This was one of the things that just made me realize like, oh shit, like this is what it's like to be around people that just think, this sounds cliche, but like think differently. And just to be around like innovative people that like don't really have rules around like this is how things should be done. So the team I joined was called Coefficient, and which doesn't mean anything externally. But what the team did was it was a team that was stack rank your friends and family, basically your friend graph. And so just be like, Jake O'Shea would be the input, and then the output is like all of your friends in order, which
Based
can be
on how
used.
much I interact with them, they interact with me, stuff like that.
Yeah, and I mean, there's like a million other features that are used in the model, and I mean, this is like 14 years ago, so I don't mind like saying this. When I first left, it was like I couldn't talk about, but yeah, like this is basically using machine learning and like a million features to figure this out. It was like scarily accurate. And so the index of it was huge at the time. Now I feel like you'd be like, yeah, like whatever, that's nothing, but huge at the time. And again, like another element of this like sort of tripling of orders of magnitude than what I was used to. And so we had racks all over in every data center, and you had to get the index had to stay together, and it had to be in a single rack, and it did take up all 40 servers in a rack, and it was contiguous.
Per person?
No. So this is the
okay,
index for
got it,
like
got
the whole like the entire user base graph, but it was contiguous. So like it had to be in a rack from 0 to 39, and you had to get this data between data centers, and it was a sort of single transfer.
So it all has to happen at once. Can't stop in the middle
Yes.
or it'll mess everything up.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we're like figuring out, and I joined, we were trying to figure out ways to do this. And we were doing like some of like the typical file transfer methods, and they would work, but they like you had to like watch them, and they were just, I mean, they were so precious and fragile. And then you're also working with like everyone else that's transferring large amounts of data around data centers internally. So it's like news feed is moving, there's all these other teams competing for bandwidth across all of our data centers. And I remember like someone was just like, someone was just like, why? Like, I think I'm gonna try to use BitTorrent to like do this. And they were like joking, but not. And I'm just like, what? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, this is what like I used to get like whatever like MP3s I was getting like the night before or something. Like, you're just like, this is, and they're like, well, why not? Like, it's a technology, it works. It
Works pretty
allows
good
you
at taking big monolithic files, fragmenting it into a bunch of small pieces.
distributing it, and like with where the hosts are distributed. And as you start going through, I'm just like, oh my god, this is literally the best. Like like it's staring us in the face. But I feel like it was such a like entry into this world of like thinking like it doesn't, there are no real rules. It's just what you sort of are willing to like, how you're willing to think and imagine and innovate. And that ended up being like the solution. It was like fantastic. It was built for that. And so that was probably, that's one of like the best moments I have of like the entry into the type of challenges, but also the types of solutions that you can come up with. And that was common around Facebook, that type of thinking. I mean, like, just we'll rebuild it or we rethink it. Like, they rebuilt Memcache, like they rebuilt all these things. They just sort of took these things that were sort of like static, stayed ideas of technology and just were like, no, we'll rethink what this needs to be for our purposes. And that's also stayed with me for a very long time.
Very cool. And so from Facebook, that then led you to a role at Uber, correct? Also in the pretty early days.
Yep.
I guess tell us the story of that. How did that come to be, and what role did you enter into within Uber?
Yep. So I was at Facebook for 3 years, pre-IPO, then IPO, then post-IPO, and I left in 2014. And I'll just be very candid. Like I wasn't super happy as a person or an engineer. And it's not like I was like moping around through the halls, but I just was like, man, like something's just not clicking. And it took me a while, but like I ended up leaving in summer of 2014. And the only reason I really mention it is because I then sort of went on this Eat, Pray, Love trip to Thailand. And I went to
discover yourself.
Literally, that was it. And like, honestly, the thinking was, there was a pragmatic element to it and there was a philosophical element to it. The pragmatic element was, actually, I'll start the philosophical element was like, more along the lines of like, something doesn't feel right. I need to figure some stuff out.
Yeah.
The pragmatic element was, because I'd actually gotten offers. I was starting to get offers from companies. I was going to go back down to Los Angeles. I was like, oh, maybe it's that I don't like San Francisco or the Bay Area. Maybe I should have never left Los Angeles. So I actually went back down and was getting offers from a number of companies in LA. And I was like, something's not right. And I was like, you can't go back to work until you figure this out. Like, Facebook's a fantastic place for engineers. Like there's something larger here that like is keeping you from being fulfilled. And I was like, until you figure that out, this problem's going to keep resurfacing. And so, excuse me. So that was both the philosophical and pragmatic reason for going to Thailand. I went to Thailand, came back, and it totally worked.
You found yourself?
I found myself. This tattoo that
TY
TY on my arm Stands for Trust Yourself.
Okay.
And it came from that trip. And there was like a series of events that happened on the trip, which like, if we have time as an appendix, I'll go into like the stories. But like they led to that. And that is a larger sense of like, I found, I'll just quickly say like, I sort of discovered that like up until that point, I was sort of living a life that was sort of leading me. Like I was just sort of like, oh, like I'll go here because I got this offer. I'll go like, I'll do this thing that's available. And through this time, I sort of figured out that like life was what I made it. Like it was up to me to sort of make choices and make decisions and actions that lead to like outcomes. What seems simple, but it's a big thing when you fundamentally understand that, and it echoes throughout like lots of life. And so I came back with that insight. Um, and there was just one company. Friends were asking, like, "What are you going to do?" And I wasn't working at the time. I was just sort of like figuring stuff out. And there was one company that I had seen this blog post from them, from their data science team. That was this car transportation company. And they were like, yeah, like we've been able to figure out like basically houses of ill repute and like places where like illicit stuff's happening because we have travel data in San Francisco and we can see the spikes on like paydays. And like, what do people do on the paydays? They tend to go spend their money on vices. And it was all tongue in cheek. It was all funny, but it was true insights into humanity from innovation. And like just the way they wrote it, it reminded me of like a lot of what Mark, not the specifics of what they wrote, but like how they approached it. It reminded me of how I felt hearing Mark the first when I mentioned he was talking about like identity and like in this world. It just was like, man, like it's they're understanding this world better through technology. And it just seemed like amazing. And that company was Uber. And I just was like, that was the only company I even thought of at the time. And then they happened to reach out to me cold. Coincidentally, total coincidence.
Serendipity is trust yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Just landing in places where you're like, oh, like, yeah, this is for somehow I ended up here. And I was about to go back out and travel again. And I was like, hey, like when I come back, let's interview. And we did. And Uber moves super fast. As fast as Facebook moved, Uber at that time was like, it was incredible how fast Uber moved. I had an offer, I think, like that day, and I signed over the weekend. No, excuse me. There was like a week. There was like about a week of me to sign. But yeah. And and that's how I landed there in November of 2014.
Okay. And so what was Uber like back? My first kind of encounter with Uber was when I came to school at UT in 2015. They were around, but not super big.
Mm-hmm.
And then that first summer of freshman year was when they got banned.
Oh, yeah.
And like
Austin.
3 different other ride sharing services popped up. And they were
Yeah.
the exact same thing, but not as good and more expensive. But 2014, I imagine that's kind of like in the midst of scaling across the US and hypergrowth, all the political stuff, like just kind of set the scene. Like, what was it like when you were joining?
Yeah. So it was, as you mentioned, hypergrowth. So in that like week or two, I said like I hadn't signed. So if you didn't sign your offer at the time, Uber was still small enough that they invited you to an open house, and like you met all the executives, and I met Tuan, the CTO, and Travis, and we talked about Thailand because Travis also. I just got back from Thailand like a few weeks before. Travis loved this. I remember talking to him about Thailand, but I was talking to Tuan, and he was like, "We're doubling in every metric every 6 months," which is like if you think about not just like revenue or customers, but like employees, like the company's doubling every 6 months. And he was just like, yeah, like we are figuring this out as we go. But, he's talking about like joining and like, this is what you'll be part of. And I remember just like the questions I remember talking to him about, like, how do you understand like traffic in like random cities like Morocco versus like Paris and like all these problems that I was like, I can't imagine like all the things that you're going through. And so when I joined, I obviously signed the offer. it was total. It was growing at a rate that like you never knew. Every single day was something brand new and like absolutely it's a sort of like problem that you were like solving with your coworkers sort of fresh. Um so I joined on November, I think it was November 11th, 2014. Halloween had just passed and basically almost all the systems just like broke. And so like cuz Halloween at the time, Halloween and New Year's Eve were the biggest
Yeah.
days, and they're like bigger on a level that like I mean the spike is massive, and so it's actually really hard to at the time. Now it's not even a big deal, but at the time it was really hard to prepare for those days because it's such a massive jump that like it's really difficult to build for it and test for it, things like that. And so almost all the systems collapsed at the time, and so they barely made it through. I joined, and they were just like, we have to figure this stuff out. And so there's a and just saying this to give you an example of like what was happening. There is a message queue system at the time called Celery, which is open source software. It's available, and they were like, we need to basically rebuild this from scratch to like handle multiple queues and like handle the scale. And so like that was my first project. Was working with a team to like rebuild this open source software, this message queue system. The brokers and the workers, we rebuilt that. Um, there are times of like it's Friday night, it's you and your coworkers, and you're like, Paris is melting down. There's just like, and it's like real time, like like I'm just mentioning the queues, like you're watching the queues get to like an astronomical level, like actual servers. And this is also like also helps at the scene. This is I feel like Uber was probably the last on-prem scaled out company. And so like there was no elastic capacity on like AWS or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's not like, oh, just like spin up another like 30 servers and like it's like what you had is like
You have to literally go physically buy the servers, bring them in, hook them up
yes,
to power, cooling.
exactly.
Yeah.
And even if like you have done all of that, like physical work, and you have the data center, your servers, they're not necessarily integrated into your systems, and you don't have things like infrastructure as code. You don't have a lot of the automations. And so, like, I mean, it's physical, not physical, it's literal, like, you have to set up a lot of these systems manually at the time. And, or you're monitoring them. I guess what I'm getting at is there's a tangible connection between like the amount of memory on this server and the viability of this company to keep running right now tonight. Like it's a real thing. And
Yeah.
like, and I feel like you don't really get that any longer. Like it's not, but there were like, oh, like this broker has this much more space. And if we run out of that space, we can no longer handle trips in Paris. Like that is the kind of thing that you'd be going through. And on the engineering side, there were, the teams were distributed. There were four main teams. There were mapping, business infrastructure, data, and real time, which is just the actual like, hey, I need a car. The car is here, matching between rider and driver. And they were intentionally distributed just to move as fast as possible. And so all four of them were almost like independent little companies within all of Uber engineering, their own databases, their own languages, their own approach to coding. And so that allowed for like hyper velocity, but it also created, it sort of forced lots of understanding of like, how do you build for environments where like this team, this is, as infrastructure engineer working in reliability, like this team wants to start using Go, and like we're already using Python over here. So like, how do you build to allow like all these teams to move super fast, but still like have some sense of like stability and like sanity. Um, Tons of, I mean, I remember we used to push in business infrastructure, like there were 100 committers. We used to push like 7 to 12 times a day. Uh, it was, and I mean, it was just all rolling out,
That's
just
like inception stage startup type
yeah,
philosophy.
yeah,
Like 12 times per day per engineer.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it was, that was the nature of the company at all facets, was just like, and that's, I mean, that's why, and I think especially in VC, like we all are aware of the sort of like sense that like so many founders come out of Uber and you hear about it, but it's very true that like Uber really was run like, and Travis really did build like this place of just like everyone sort of just solve their own problems. Like you had a time just like go solve the problem. Um, and there were very few limits on like what you could do and how you could do it. And so you just had this sense of like really smart people that were like hyper aggressive, hyper driven, just like going to solve problems, that were like, that loved it, that were just like, this is all I want to do. Like, I want Paris. I want to be here on Friday night with Paris burning down with like 5 other engineers. Like, I want to solve this. Like, this is where I want to be. Like, I don't want to be anywhere else. And it was an amazing environment. I remember like people would come in for interviews, or we'd be out like in San Francisco, like out at a bar, like at a restaurant, and like people come up to us like, "Oh, like you guys work at Uber, like we hear it's so crazy, and like I'm thinking about joining, or I'm thinking about submitting my resume, but like I hear it's so crazy, you guys are worked to death," and I'd be like, "No, like we're not. It's not. It's not the managers or like Travis or like the leaders being like, you better be here, you better work." And we're like, oh my God, like how do I be here? It was like, no, like we're self-selecting for people that want to be here. Like, and we will tell you in interviews, like, this is the environment, like this is the level of intensity and velocity. Every day here will feel like to you like you have just lived like 6 months.
It's
But
culture. Just
it's
like you
culture,
said
yeah.
with Facebook.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And both of those companies are actually very similar, and they're similar in like, I think, foundational ways, and then how they express the drive and their like goal to change humanity is different. Um, but foundationally and fundamentally, they were very similar. Like, I couldn't see going from Facebook to any other company as easy it was to go from Facebook to Uber. And I used to talk about that a lot because we had a lot of, not a lot, but we had a good amount of Facebookers coming over.
Yeah.
I mean, there was always just sort of the round robin,
Yeah. for
Facebook,
sure.
Google, Uber, Amazon, Apple. Like, well, Apple is a little bit outside of that, but people would sort of round robin. But the Facebook to Uber transfer, I thought, was always like the most natural one. And there was just like, I mean, that sort of hacker ethos, that sort of like their honor rules, just like, let's go fix the world, or let's like truly change the world in this scale. They're very much tied to like the end user, and this sense of like experimenting, like understanding the user experience very, very, very deeply, and like in a millisecond way. Like, because you get the feed, like both companies are very good at getting like immediate feedback from the user, whether it's like an ad that's going to be selected or the price of the ride. Um, so yeah,
Yeah. So you had mentioned earlier that Uber was where you kind of first were able to maybe like outgrow or feel less of that imposter syndrome.
yeah.
Was that a specific situation, or did you just kind of like feel like you had your feet under you? Like, tell me about kind of moving past imposter syndrome. Because I think there's probably listeners that are engineers or entrepreneurs or whatever. And I mean, I feel it too. I think everybody has
Yeah.
dealt with imposter syndrome to
Yeah.
some extent. So would love to hear kind of your story.
Yeah, the one thing, like, I'll preface all this with like, just because you said everyone has it, everyone feels
Yeah.
it, and like, and what I've learned is that like the more I talked about it, the more, both for myself, selfishly, it helped me deal with it by just saying it out loud to
Yeah.
others, but also I would notice the rooms I were in, people on my team, it helped them with it when like others, when I would say it out loud, like, oh yeah, like I totally have it. right now, or I had as part of my career, it comes back too. Like, and that's one of the other things that like I've had to learn that was challenging, is that like, not challenging, but really informative. And like I had to grow into accepting this. There have been times in my life where I thought I had it licked. And I was like, oh, cool. I'm good. Like I'm ready to be like at this level. I'm ready to do whatever, ready for the rest of my career. And then it would come back like when I would do something totally new. And I would just be like, oh my God, like it's paralyzing me again. Um, and so yeah, anyway, I find that like just talking about it is one of the best things. But so how it like it's at the time, me sort of getting over it, it wasn't intentional. There was nothing that happened at Uber that was like this moment, sort of like in a binary way, like, oh, this moment happened, and then like that changed my outlook or allowed me to sort of get past it at the time. It was more all the stuff that had happened in Thailand in the months between, where I just sort of realized, um, I this sounds like very like sort of cliche or
Eat,
like,
pray, love.
yeah, but like I
Yeah.
found my voice, and like, and I really truly did. I mean, in terms of like ideas, in terms of literally speaking up in meetings, in terms of literally expressing my opinions on like engineering designs or code or like reliability, um, and some of the like softer things, and just like like I said, like speaking up in a meeting or like having a really frank conversation with like a peer or a manager. Um, Realizing that like my opinions on like transportation or like how to build for like low latency requests were like valid. Like,
Yeah.
and it's hard to like, I feel like when I say that sometimes it's like, well, of course it is, but like, but I think especially when you're an engineer in these rooms, I remember when I like started at Facebook, and I was completely freaked out. It's just like every single person, like after the first few weeks, I was like, every single person I'm in a room with has a master's from Stanford, Berkeley, Caltech, Carnegie Mellon, MIT. Like, and I have a bachelor's degree from you. Like, what am I do? Like, what am I doing here? Like, and I was terrified to open my mouth. Like, um, and so when I got to Uber, because of like some of the work I had done, and also realizing that like if I had realized that like if you can stay quiet and you can like let this can be your reality, but you should leave technology.
Yeah.
Go back to law school. And that really was where I was at. I was like I said, like when I had the offers coming in, I was like, you can't go back to work if you don't lick this. It was like, you just shouldn't do this because you're not really doing, you're not fully embracing what you can do or bring.
Yeah.
So I was like, just go back to law school. And I was like, well, I'm not doing that. So then I started to trust myself and push
All right, well,
forward.
if I'm not going to go to law school, I need to be comfortable expressing my point
Yes.
of view and
Yeah. And
taking yourself more serious.
Yeah. And all of that happened in those months. And so at Uber, it was so funny. And I talked to friends, and I'm just like, I was a different man before this time of my life. And I'm just like, if you knew, like, the person you're seeing now is not the person back then. When I got to Uber, it was like a totally different experience. Like, I just like, I just was embracing, like, building this thing. Like, I was hired to help I was like the first SRE engineer hired. And so I was hired to sort of build the concept of reliability, in terms of like philosophy and practices and principles, all of it at Uber, and just sort of like able to start just saying like, oh, like this is how to look at this. This is how to look at a service. This is how to look at like production readiness. And one of the things that helped here was that I think we all do this. I still do this. I'm doing it right now. I do it with you guys here at Antler. And it's so funny because you see it throughout your life. And I think everyone does this. There are things that I think are just sort of like naturally, I don't know what I know is like expertise. It's just what's in my head.
Yeah.
And,
Intuition.
yes.
Yeah.
And especially like when you're in a domain, you just have this intuition. You just have this expertise. When I first got to Uber, there were like things that I would just say that I just didn't even like. I'm just like, oh yeah, like this and this, or like, oh, that's like we should approach this service going out live like this, or like here's how we should like collect this data or list these metrics, whatever it was. This is how we should do interviewing. And people just be like, oh my God. And I was like, what?
Great idea, Rick.
Yeah, like, yeah. And it's like, are you some wizard? And not that it's about me being like this smart. It was about, I think, like I said, I think everyone goes through that. Like, and all, like, whatever you have in your head, you forget that like everyone else doesn't have that in their head. And a lot of sort of the tragedy of imposter syndrome is that like you don't share that stuff. Like you just think like everyone else knows that if I say it, I'm going to sound stupid. And the tragedy of it is that like you never say that stuff. And so just by like saying it out loud more, trusting myself that like maybe you do have an insight that's worthy of sharing. And sometimes I feel nervous to say it, but I still say it. And then seeing people be like, oh my God. And then within like a week, like we're doing interviewing like that. Like I just said this random thing to a manager when we were getting lunch. And like a week later, like candidates coming in and we're now interviewing in this way. Like, oh shit, like this is like people, I do have like insight. Like,
Yeah.
And so that was part of it that really started to change when I got to Uber.
Nice. So you tell a pretty crazy story about your time at Uber. I don't know if I prepped you for this, but about like almost losing the entire database of drivers globally. And basically
everyone. It was everyone. It wasn't just drivers. It was all data.
All right. So tell that story for the audience, because it's fascinating that you can have a company at that scale and at that level of like success where they completely reinvented the way that people move around, right? To this day. And still it almost like completely went to shit.
Yeah.
So yeah, tell us that story.
Yeah. So I'm going to tell it, but I do want to say two things. One is that like all companies, no matter the scale, no matter like the expertise of the people inside, always, however well you think it's run, it's duct tape inside. Like everything is like that. And like no matter where you go, there's gonna be, and like I think the level of duct tape differs. But I guarantee you go to Meta now, Google, and you'd see some systems, you'd be like, oh my God. And like the engineers internally would tell you, like, oh yeah, like that system is just like, oh my God, like it's a little fragile. Like, you know, like that's just how things are. And it always seems from the outside that things are perfect and they're not. And then the other thing, sort of related to this, is that I think I want to say, like, we would always have something that we said at Uber, and I think like a lot of like large scale engineering teams tend to say this to engineers. It's just like, if you haven't crashed the site or almost lost the company, like you're not an engineer here yet. And so
rite of passage almost.
Yeah, exactly. And so like I just want to say those two things. Now, this was a serious situation, but I also do want to say that like this is the nature of engineering.
Yeah.
And like and also like if you're not like with those two correlate to those two things, like if those two things aren't true, then like you might not be pushing enough. And like Uber was definitely like pushing, like let's go and let's build technology to change the world. So anyway, the details are, all data was on a single database, and we were building other databases internally to be able to start to break out like drivers.
So this one like monolithic driver, rider, trip, everything database.
Yeah. And we were building to move away from that, but it was, this is still where we were at the time. And just like thinking through all the details. So we had a number of replicas and one primary. Of course, there's just one primary. And on the primary, I don't know, like, I won't go into too much detail about Postgres, but Postgres does what's called like a write-ahead log, and like when you're sending out.
So one thing I want to do with this podcast is like explain technical things in a way that people can understand.
Okay.
So if you could actually give us like an explain like I'm five
Yeah.
rundown of Postgres and some of these dynamics, that would actually be great.
Yeah, for sure. So with Postgres, when it's sending out.
And really quick, Postgres is a type of database.
Yes. So Postgres, like MySQL, is a type of database. And so as it's sending out all the writes to its replicas, all the data needs to be completely consistent. And it stores the logs, the writes are happening on the server.
And the writes meaning like it's writing a new row or updating a row.
So like insert 5 stars to Jake's latest ride.
Yeah.
Here are the columns. Here are the rows to insert. Here's the information, blah blah. And so as those writes come in to the single primary, which is the write database, the writes come in to the write database, and then it sends out that update to all of its replicas, which are also called read databases. And so with this type of database, it can only be one write database.
So
but you can
only the primary can write new things. The rest can just read from the primary.
Yes. Well, yes, they're reading initially to update their read-only state from the primary, but then the reads, let's say it's just like, what is Jake's current rating? That's a read. And so that will go to any of the 2 or 20 or 200 read databases. Okay. So you can scale out read databases theoretically infinitely, not really, but theoretically, but you can only have one write database. And so it looks like a very broad single parent, multiple children tree graph.
Got it.
And so with Postgres, the data needs to be entirely consistent from beginning to end. So when I say beginning, I mean like the first write that ever happened to like create database drivers or something like that to the last update, the last write. With MySQL, you don't have to have that consistency. You can go into the log and say like, hey, like this was a bad write. It like screwed something up. Delete this write, and then just send it on. And then keep on as you're processing log. Just skip over this.
Yeah.
Skip over this write when you're sending the updates to the reads. Postgres does not allow for that nonsense. It's like, no, like this has to be consistent, like from beginning to end. I need total consistency, and it just will not really accept anything else. And so we had some background setting at the time. Infrastructure, which I was on, was getting, and I was on infra on call, but I was also in a embedded reliability team for the team that managed the database. Okay. But I was also in general. Uber at the time just had a large general infrastructure team, and there was an overall on call for that, and that on call was horrendous. Like
on call meaning you could be out on a Friday night and they give you a call and say something broke. We need you to come in and fix it.
Yes, okay. Exactly. And this is on call is like, excuse me. On call is just, it's a key part of the role when you're in site reliability engineering or SRE or production engineering.
My fiance is on call some holidays. She does data at HEB, and holidays are obviously their Super Bowl, and so they need to make sure that reporting and everything is coming in consistent.
Yep, and it doesn't have to be reliability. It can be any team that needs awareness or like availability. And yes, like you mentioned, like holidays, nights, weekends, and it usually rotates, and it's a very there's a lot of like pros and cons to it. It's a constant. You learn so much being on call.
Yeah.
You really learn how like because you have to know, because you're the one getting the call. It's like, hey, this is hard down. You need to fix it, or at least know who to call to fix it. but you're the one that's like, go figure it out. So in any case, and we can go into the nature of on-call more if you want to, because there really is. We can talk about it for like an hour. But the infra on-call was everything at Uber that like had something going wrong that wasn't like explicitly assigned to like a team or service. And at the time, it wasn't as organized as I'm sure, as I know it is now. So I remember, there were some days on infra on-call where I would get 1,000 alerts. This was common, like 1,000 individual alerts to your phone, to the degree that like your phone battery would die. And so like people, as you were like handing off, be like, hey, like, make sure you have a battery pack because your phone's probably gonna die just from like processing all the alerts that are coming in. And so there was a significant amount of noise and blah, 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 blah. And this is also just sort of the nature of the beast. Like when you're scaling, there's always 40,000 fires. And so you're making choices about which fires to put out. It's also similar, by the way, to being executive, which like people have asked me like, are there parallels that you've drawn from being executive, being reliability engineering? And I'm like, some elements of them are very similar. Like you're basically choosing which fires to put out and blah, blah. You're moving very quickly with like point in time information. You're making decisions that like, you're never gonna have 100% information. You have to make them quickly. Okay, anyway. So there's an alert that comes in that the primary write database is getting close to capacity for its hard drive storage. The logs, and what this means is that the actual storage of the server is filling up, and it's filling up to a degree that like it's about to run out of space, 95%.
Which means you can't write.
You can't write anymore.
And the whole system just stops.
It will actually, yeah. And so sort of comes in, not handled, and then like another one comes in, it's at 99%, not handled, and then like, no, excuse me, that won't be caught. And I went to the people that were managing our Postgres magicians, and was like, hey, like, we're just catching this alert. We need to just like clear out data. And this was a common thing that we were doing. Like, there's zero blame here. Like for the people that got the alerts, like there's zero blame. And this is what I was saying, like the nature of the beast. Like when things like this happen, you end up fixing a lot of stuff. And so you end up seeing where the fail points are in your architecture, and your infrastructure, and your process with like people communicate, like all of it. You just start to, this is when you learn, oh, we have ways to get better. And so we thought we were deleting old logs that had been processed, but new logs that had been unprocessed. And by process, I mean sent to the read databases already. So we deleted logs that had not been
from the primary to all the children that copied.
Yes. And so some that had not been processed, that their only existence was on that write database, on that hard drive. So these are writes. So it's like, oh, like this driver did this credit card number got updated, blah, blah. And immediately system just starts like freaking out. And we're like, what's going on? And then like, it's so funny. I was talking to one of my best buddies, mentor, almost like a brother to me. He actually worked at Uber after this event. He came on like maybe a year later, but he ended up being the head of SRE at Uber. Like just one of my, still to this day, like one of my close friends. And there was something else that happened years later, and he was like, yeah, like it was so funny because all of infra at Uber used to be on the same floor on Market Street in San Francisco. And he was like, when this other thing happened years later, he's like, I just heard all of the pagers go off across the floor, and I knew like, oh my God, it's like this carol of the bells of just like pagers going off. Anyway, that also happened this time that I'm telling the story of. You just hear all these alerts are going off. You're like, oh, fuck, something's like, and you almost immediately we knew it happened. Like, if you hit remove and the database starts freaking out, like, oh shit, you remove some important stuff. So the actual, like what happened was pretty straightforward. deleted logs that had been processed. The resolution was terrifying. So we cached all of the
Cache meaning temporarily stored in memory.
Yes. Actually, it's funny because as I'm saying this, I'm like, man, like I'm not thinking of the things that like everyone doesn't know. As I was saying earlier, like you have things in your
That's
head
what
that
I'm
you're
here
just like, yeah, thank you. So we would cache all updates, which like we would store all of them in memory, not hard drive memory, but random access memory on servers.
24 hours later, you delete it and replace it.
Yes. And these are being pulled out by actually that message queue that I mentioned earlier that we had actually updated. We had rewritten to be able to handle more. But it's pulling from things that are stored in memory on what are called brokers. Basically, they're caches. And so we are storing data. So even though we can't write to the database because the database isn't crashed, like we are storing some data, but there's a hard limit on this. I think there were 16 gigs at the time. And so like the outage widens and it's just like, oh my God. And like eventually like VPs are aware of it and Travis is aware of it. CTO is aware of it. And we're trying to restart Postgres, but we've deleted some information. So you can't bring Postgres back up. The caches are filling up. We're doing math to figure out, okay, we have like this much time because we have this much space, this much cache. We have the data being written to it is being written at this rate. And so you can sort of do some back and napkin math and figure out like,
your run.
Yeah.
Cache runway.
Yep. Yes, exactly. And we're just like, well, we have until this point before we start to hard lose new data.
And that's terrible because that's losing payments that people have made, updates to profiles, new signups, everything.
Yep. Yeah. And it's reputational. Actually, Uber, a little aside, like Uber is one of the places that really started to learn about reputational cost.
Yeah.
Often you think about like when you're in reliability, you think about real-time costs, just like, oh, we couldn't make that payment, this service is down. But you learn about because your competitor is very obvious and the cost of switching is almost zero, just open Lyft, open sidecar at the time. And so when you have that type of marketplace, you become very aware of reputational costs because once you lose a customer, you might lose them for life.
Yeah.
So anyway, we were working with this Postgres consulting firm. We're on the phone with them and it's, 11, 12 o'clock at night. People are all in this war room and we're rebuilding Postgres like from the actual code and like trying to get it to accept that like the state is incomplete, but that's okay. Just skip over this part and just keep going. You can't get it. And we're like losing replicas because we tried to like restart a replica with this new code, like newly compiled. Like we basically recompiling Postgres, putting it on a machine, like hope it starts. It doesn't start, move to the next one. It's going on through the night. A number of engineers working super hard. All teams are involved because like each individual team is dealing with their own. Because again, like this is like the central database. So that feeds a whole bunch of other stuff like services and products and blah, blah. I left around like 4 a.m. just to get some sleep. I came back like 7 or 8 or something. And there's people camped out all over. We eventually made it.
Figured out how
we
to
got a replica,
server.
restarted, was stable in production. That fully catches up, promote that to be the new write, and then you rebuild the rest. Lots of things change from that. And that's one of those things that you just have. I mean, they truly change the culture of a company, especially engineering, but also other things, other areas as well. There were a few other outages like that at Uber that like truly changed the nature of engineering and makes it better. Uber SRE to me at this to this day is, I mean, the level of quality and excellence they have for real time reliability and production is like bar none. Like, it's incredible what they do. And it's because of things like that. It's, and that's why I was saying, like, those things are scary and like, but they have to happen for you to really become the best in the world. Like, you have to like figure that stuff out. Like, I mean, like I was saying, even when I started, like, my first day, they were like, yeah, 2 weeks ago, we almost lost. Like, Halloween almost burned the company down.
Yeah.
But then, like, by New Year's Eve, when I first started, was like, we have to have this fixed by New Year's Eve. And we did. And so, like, that's why, like, I know I'm like harping this, but I want to get across like those things when you're really building and building like serious stuff that's never been done before that really is going to have like a world changing impact and it's like scaled and like really solving hard problems. Like, that's going to happen.
Yeah. So while you're at Uber, obviously tons of kind of formative experiences. You also got a few promotions. And that eventually led you to join, was it right after Uber that you joined Carta?
No, Carter was like a year and a half
Okay.
later.
Well, so I guess tell the story of going from Uber into like an executive level role at Carta, which
Yeah.
is another well-known technology startup.
Yeah. Yeah. So, SRE at Uber, loved it, helped to build the entire domain there. Then I moved into capacity engineering. I always wanted to do machine learning from my time at Facebook and infrastructure. So I shifted over to do that. Excuse me. And I did that for a year and a half or so. Loved it. To this day, it's still like the most exciting. It's hard to like put into like a definition, but some like the most exciting stuff I've ever like built. Like we
Yeah.
like really built something like new.
Millions of views.
Well, like not like that, but like I had never like I had this like vision idea of like bringing machine learning and data science to infrastructure, which like hadn't really been done in industry. Like Facebook and Google were doing it, but that was really it. And like what I wanted to do and what the team, and there were also people on the team that were also like brilliant and insightful. And just what we built was like, it was just so exciting. It just was like, man, like the world hasn't really seen this before. Like, how do you like use this stuff to understand infrastructure better? Anyway, so I was doing that, loving it, but then we had a vice president of infrastructure join. His name was Matthew Mentoring, and he's an amazing, amazing leader and person. And he joined, and he had this role next to him called strategic advisor, and it's essentially like right hand person.
Like kind of like a chief of staff almost.
Yeah, for the most part, chief of staff is like, so the like that like strategic advisor, chief of staff, like they tend to be interchangeable and they tend to be specifically defined by the place in which they are operating. And so like that's the best reference for it. I focus much more on by the name strategic advisor, like I focus much more on strategy, looking further out. But there were some things that were sort of like real time and like, this week, next week, but looking across the breadth of all of infrastructure. There are 800 engineers, 7 domains like compute, data, developer productivity, things like that. And my previous manager from capacity engineering had like moved on to that role, strategic advisor. I was still on capacity engineering. Then he left the company entirely. Person that was initially strategic advisor, he left the company and recommended that I take on the role. And Matthew came to me and was like, would you want to do this role? And I just was like, once again, actually, thought he was like, hadn't made a mistake. This one was less easy for me to reason like, oh, they've made a mistake. But I was just like, no, like I've been an engineer my whole life. Like I've never been an advisor, or like worked as an executive or been in those rooms. And like, no, like I just want to build. And we kept talking for about a week or two, and then I accepted the role. Absolutely loved it. Like absolutely just fell in love with it. at the time I had just been starting to get into things like behavioral economics, behavioral science, psychology, um, strategy, military strategy, um, overall like game theory, overall strategic thinking, like all these other domains that I just like intellectually love, just aside from engineering and technology. And this role, you just all of that is on deck every minute. It actually like engineering just becomes one element of like 20 different things that you have to like use simultaneously to solve a very fuzzy, ambiguous problem. And I just was like, this is everything. I just loved it. Like,
Yeah.
oh my God. And so I worked with him for about a year and a half. And that was just, I mean, all these people, by the way, like all these people I've mentioned, they're all like significant mentors, amazing, amazing people. And he was just an amazing person to learn from, super high EQ, super high IQ, deeply affected my sense of leadership and culture and marrying those kinds of things with technology and engineering. So when I left Uber, I wanted to I wanted to solve these types of problems. And I was like, how can I do this? And I was going to get an MBA because I was like, that's probably one of the main ways that I can be exposed to all these, like this type of multidisciplinary thinking. And then decided to not do that, but moved more to angel investing. And then while sort of like poking around angel investing, the CTO from Carta reached out to me. I told him I wanted to be a strategic advisor and nothing else. And he was like, well, we don't really have that role on our team, but we do have a vice president role available. I said no once again. You might see a theme.
Not initially taking good opportunities.
Yes, pretty much.
We figured it out.
Yeah. I mean, I often think like I can't do these things. Like these things are way beyond my bailiwick, and then I do them and like I love this and I can do it. Yeah, we chatted for a few weeks and I took on the role, and then so I joined Card as vice president of platform infrastructure in November of 2021. Yes.
And what stage was the company at that point? Was it like Series A, Series B?
I want to say that we were further than that. It was like, I want to say C. I couldn't like I.
But like solidly in kind of the growth stage, some semblance of product market fit.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. As a matter of fact, like product market fit had already been achieved, and we like the reason I was hired was to help us scale and start to establish as more of a scalable platform.
Yeah.
And Carta also had ambitions at the time of doing public markets.
Secondary marketplace.
So both secondary markets and public markets.
Oh, okay.
And so
needs obviously a lot of infrastructure.
Like low latency requests, high levels of requests, high availability, especially the public markets part. And so those were some of the reasons I joined, was to sort of establish it, both in terms of like being available and stable for the products already there, but also growing into these much more mature, more sophisticated technical areas.
So what were some of the biggest, I guess, differences that you experienced? You covered some of them already, but going from kind of an individual contributor builder to like a true executive where you're probably not touching the code base very much.
Mm-hmm.
You're 2 or 3 layers removed from the actual builders themselves, but still needing to understand everything that's going on, manage teams, get aligned on strategy, culture. Like, talk to me about that shift. Like, what was the biggest change for you? What did you enjoy? What did you maybe not enjoy?
Yeah. So I was both prepared for this shift, but also completely unprepared for this shift in some ways. So the leadership part, the like strategic thinking, the leadership, the big picture understanding, I was prepared for it because I had been strategic advisor.
Yep.
I'd already sort of been doing de facto types of things like that to some degree, de facto leadership, blah, blah. The management part, I had was unprepared for. I never officially managed a single person in my life before I became vice president at Carta.
And now you're managing like directors.
Yes.
Managers of managers.
Yes. And that, and I mean, I was fully aware of that gap and was talking through that and understanding, A, there's a like, can I do it? And B, there's the, do I want to do this?
Yeah, for sure.
So talking through both of those sides of it. So I'll say, like, I had already fallen in love with the strategic thinking, the multidisciplinary thinking parts of things, like the big picture stuff, like understanding how to move various pieces of a chessboard to gain a single goal or things like that. And like understanding how multiple parts work together and like that part I wasn't too nervous about. And I'd already gone through a lot of the growing pains shifting from an engineer to being on that other side of the table when I was strategic advisor at Uber. And like one of the key ones, probably the hardest one for me at least, was when you're an engineer, like your feedback is very specific and it's very timely and it's continuous. Like your code works or it doesn't work. You have code reviews, you have like things are in production, like your thing failed, like you need to go fix this bug, like people's like customer sentiment isn't high, blah, 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 blah. When you shift to be an executive, it's somewhat like ambiguous or somewhat just like, it can be ambiguous, especially around like cultural things, handling team morale or like, things like that. And so that shift and not having that feedback, and sometimes with culture stuff, sometimes you wait a year, like you have to wait a year or longer. You don't know. You're like, I hope this is the right decision. Like I said, you often also have to make very quick decisions with a dearth of information, and you just sort of have to like hope you're making the right decision. With engineering, you can often like wait to get a good amount of information, and it's a bit more like objective. I dealt with a lot of that already, and so like that part wasn't too much of a hurdle. I think shifting to being executive at Carta, the biggest shift was the difference in, I guess, timeline. Well, try to think of how to say it. I think I had become like, I was used to working at Uber. Yeah. The biggest hurdle at that, trying to be, I'm like, want to be candid, but I don't want.
No, I understand. Take your time.
I think here's what I'll say. I think when I joined Carta, I was trying to, you're building with a lot of, there are teams that have already just been very, 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 very product oriented. When I probably say product oriented, I mean very oriented around throwing something against the wall, see if it sticks, and just moving very sort of experimentally.
Yeah.
And I was coming from two places that had significantly scaled and could do both with a very, 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 very well. So like both Facebook and Uber were fantastic at experimenting and like high velocity on new features, products, things like that, but also like scaling and stabilizing and things like that. And there were a lot of people that had experience with it. So like there were people that had like come from Google or Amazon that were now at Uber. So they have done this for like 15 years. And so Carta, there was a good amount of like new people to doing that. So like trying to help build in culture and philosophy of like what this looks like, what does scale look like, what does like stability and excellence and these things look like across a domain, across like entire multiple orgs, was a bit challenging. And I think that shifting from and being a leader, like when you're the engineer, you can sort of dive in and just sort of focus on what you're looking at.
Yeah.
But broadening out was sort of was a bit of a challenge.
Yeah. What would you say is one kind of takeaway that you had from that experience? It still kind of informs how you see or operate in the world.
Um, I think making sure that making understanding your leadership style and making sure that your leadership style and your worldview and your idea of what success and excellence and growth, all of that aligns with other leadership.
Yeah.
If it doesn't, as a leader, if it doesn't, you can, it can be a pathway to a lot of frustration. You can also take on education and like, oh, like I can try to move needle here. I mean, if your approach is potentially the right approach for that domain, that industry, et cetera. But that's also a job that you're not doing. And so like
Yeah.
understanding what is it that you want to do and does this align with the skills you want to build, the kind of leadership skills and approaches that you want to get better at? Like, is this the right thing for you at this time in your career? And more importantly, your career to be for you and what makes you happy.
Yeah.
Um,
Nice. Well, so from that experience, you then kind of dove headfirst into professional angel investing.
yes.
You had been kind of dabbling, but it seems like this is when you kind of spent a lot more time with it.
Yes.
Yeah. So I guess like what initially drew you to angel investing? I know you mentioned you did a bit of it while you were at Uber. Or
Right.
maybe it was
Right
right
after
after
Uber.
Uber.
Yeah.
Yeah. Makes sense since Uber did so well. So congrats to you.
Yeah. Thank you.
But so yeah, you started dabbling in it. I guess like what attracted you to angel investing? What kind of got you into this space at first? And like what drove the interest so much to where like you want to make this kind of your primary thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, like I mentioned, when I left Uber, I was like trying to figure like what can I do to keep working in like this multidisciplinary thinking, strategic thinking, um, and really working to help organizations, whether it's a team, a company, whatever it is, to solve problems like this. And so I thought about getting the MBA, and I was very close. I mean, like I was right about to start applying. Like I still have my list, like London School of Economics and Carnegie Mellon. Tapper at Carnegie Mellon were like number 1 and 2. Um, and then right around that time, I was watching and I was debating. I was like talking to everyone, people that had MBAs, and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do and should I do it. And I was watching this talk, and there was a woman that like had an MBA, but she also had done angel investing. She was an angel investor. And so when I asked her, like, what do you think is better? Like, what, like, if you had to do it again, like, which would you choose if you had to just choose one? And she was like, an MBA, is, some of the top schools is 150 to 200K, and it's great for like networking, you learn and things like that. But you could also take that money and invest in 10 companies, 20 companies, and just learn boots on the ground what it's like to like solve these problems. Um, and I was like, that totally resonates. Like that makes a ton of sense. Like, yeah.
It's Tim Ferriss, who I had mentioned to you before the podcast. That's what he did as well.
Really?
He was gonna go to his MBA, and then he was like, "What if instead I use that money and just invested in companies?"
Yeah.
And
I
that's
didn't know
kind
that.
of like what led him down the rest of his life path. But interesting.
And when the person said it, I was like,
oh, yeah, and it seems in retrospect obvious, but it's not, and I mean,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
it doesn't, like, I wasn't thinking like that. It's cool to hear that he did the same
Yeah.
thing.
Well, there's what's interesting is like if you invest in 20 companies, there's a pretty high likelihood, like a definite non-zero likelihood that you lose all that money with
Mhm.
nothing to show for it.
Yeah.
Whereas at least with an MBA, like no one really fails an MBA. You'll meet people, you'll learn something. I'm sure you'll have all this experience at the very least.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a riskier path.
Yeah. But, like, I also, like, I also see, like, so going into angel investing, I remember so I decided to start, like, really looking into angel investing, and when I
Yeah.
did, so then I started talking to angel investors and asking about, like, what is it like and blah, 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 and why'd you get into it, things like that. And the general consensus was you need to do this because of you have to have an intrinsic value
Yeah.
to this because, like, as you just said, like, you should approach it as in, like, you will lose all your money.
Yeah.
Like, that's just sort of like that's a possibility. And so, like, what else are you getting from this? Do you like helping other people? Do you like just understanding these types of problems? Do you like looking at industries? What do you love technology to that? But, like, have something else that fulfills you. And that was something that, like, also really resonated with me because it's just like, man, like, I just love strategic thinking. I love big problem thinking. I really love working with really smart people just to solve problems. Like, it thrills me to no end. And so that was really one of the things that, like, got me into it. And I had only invested in, like, one company at that point, and, like, hyper focused on all of it. Like, oh my God, like, I just, like, doing everything to understand just the nature of it,
Yeah.
which I think is common with, like, someone goes hiking for the first time and then they're at REI buying, like, everything they can. It's like, I'm a hiker now. Like, I gotta understand everything about hiking. And then I went back into industry, Carta, and then another company. And then when I left that company and left industry, I really dove in. And it's funny. That's right when I met you at the dinner. We were at a dinner
Mhm.
at during
Right
South by
after I
Southwest.
joined. No, yeah,
Yeah.
Juliet or
Yep.
yeah, the Italian place.
Yep. And I coincidentally sat next to you. Perna had cold emailed me, and I, like, just coincidentally.
No,
Uh,
she told me to sit next to you.
really?
Yeah, she was like, there's this guy Rick. He was an engineering executive because at Foundation I worked with a lot of engineering executives. She was like, I don't know if you had invested in Hacker Pulse at that point, but
It was about, like, within a couple weeks.
yeah, she was like, he's looking at Hacker Pulse or whatever, but just like sit down and get to know him. Like he's someone that we should like stay close to. So yeah.
I had no clue. This whole time I've just been like, man, the universe is, like, always just, like, showing up in weird
Well,
ways.
it's partly like
That's true. That's true. But that's awesome. I love the outcome. It's still the outcome is still all that matters.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
like, yeah, and sat next to you and I don't even remember, but I was just like, I'm looking for something. Like, I love teaching, I love mentorship, and I just want to keep working this domain. And you told me about the visiting expert. And coincidentally, like I mentioned, I guess not coincidentally, but within a couple weeks, I had invested in Hacker Pulse, which is one of the companies here at Antler, uh, and just started getting deeper and deeper into it, and realizing that, like, I mean, the experience I had with Gleb and then experience I had coming here and meeting other founders. Gleb is the CEO of Hacker Pulse. And then the experience I had working here at Antler with the other founders was so fulfilling on, like, this deep level, and it brought me back to, like, everything I, like, love about technology and everything I've loved in my life. The best times when I'm just, like, working with people to build stuff and people that are, like, optimistic and driven and just, like, let's go, like that. And again, like, the intrinsic value has to be because, like, it's not like it fills me up so much. So, like, that's when I really started to get pulled in last year. It was just like, this thing is so valuable to me. Like, I feel like I could, like, leap. 1,000 feet in the air every time I walk into a room with
It's the
founders.
coolest job.
It is the coolest. Isn't it? I feel like, I
I
mean,
couldn't have designed it on paper, but like if I designed it on paper, it would not be as cool as it is in reality.
yes, I have that feeling too. You know what's funny? I've had that feeling, but I've never really said it like that. But I have
So I
that
feel about
same
my
feeling.
fiance too. Like if I had to like write down
Yes.
what I wanted to meet in like a life partner or whatever.
Yeah, it wouldn't be that. That's awesome.
I mean, that's truly how I feel about the job too.
Yeah. I mean, and there are moments here. I mean, honestly, you and the team, I feel like it's just a stroke of like, just a stroke of lightning that like doesn't hit twice. Like, I mean, like working with you guys, working with you all is incredible. And like being able to work with founders at this stage and like, I mean, there are moments I'll be here and I'm just like, I'll get like overwhelmed with just like, how cool is this? Like watching the founders jam or like during a town hall and like, I'll just be in the back watching them present. And I'm just like, I can't imagine being anywhere else and having this level of like, I mean, I'll get chills sometimes. I'll just be like, in 3 years, that person's going to be like, this is going to be something like, and like, but watching like them grow and like, and coaching and working with you all and like understanding businesses and people at this stage, it's so formative and it can be anything. And it's so unclear and just like, it's actually like, to your point, like you actually, it's hard to describe on paper. And I've invited people to come down, like just come see it. Like I can't describe how, and like I'll talk to friends here in town or like my family or friends that are still back in San Francisco. And I'm like, when I start talking about what I do, I just get like I'm just like I'm like shaking and I'm like, oh my God. And they're just like I've had people come here for like the family dinners we had last week. They're like, I just want to see because you talking about it is just like, I can't believe how excited you are. And I feel that like, I still am not giving it like its fair due. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Well, no, I'm glad that you're enjoying it. It's been like really awesome to work with you for. So like just
Thank you,
for
you
the
too.
audience to know too, you've gone from professional angel investor and you're now formal venture partner at Antler.
Yes.
So you're sourcing founders, you're working with founders, helping get them through the investment committee, supporting them post-investment, like the full kind of stack of investment work, which is really cool. I guess 2 final questions on the investing piece, and then want to dive into some rapid fire. I think first is like, what do you look for when you're talking with different founders? When like someone is pitching you for investment, what are some of like the 1 or 2 frameworks that you use to look at them or things that you look for that gets you really excited about an opportunity?
Yeah. So I think there's the personal, like me investing as a personal angel investor, excuse me. And I didn't realize this till after I'd invested in a few people. And I started to like retroactively, like why, like what created that? Like, why did I choose?
Yeah.
I mean, I know why in the moment I did, but then like, as you start to get like N, that's not just one, like you have N, you start to look for like underlying patterns.
For sure. And it's such a weird thing where you don't know if you're any good at it until several years, because it takes several years for the company to either die or move to the next phase or whatever. And so it's really, really long feedback cycles.
Yes. Yeah. And I've always been a big fan of like, especially as I moved further into my career, of like intuition and just trusting in myself. And like, where is this leading me? Like, what did I see that maybe I didn't even pick up on explicitly or objectively, but that like this pattern clearly emerged. And one of the things that I've realized, and sometimes I feel weird saying it because it's not super scientific, it's not super objective, but founders that when I'm in the room with them, there's a sense of like, there's no one else that I could be in a room with that like would make me feel like I get chills. And like, and it's not just like raw intelligence. It's not like, oh, like this person's really smart. Cause like I've been at the companies that I've worked at, like I've been in like, and also just through my like education and career, like I've been in rooms with lots of smart people. I've been with smart people. It's not just the intelligence. There's like something about that person that like on this topic, with this person, with their experience, the way they're looking at this problem, the way they're talking about it, I could, for 30 years, I could listen to them talk, and I want to sit for 30 years and listen to them talk about this. And there's a sense of like overwhelming admiration's not the right word, but overwhelming like awe. That's a better word. Overwhelming awe of just like open mouth, like, oh my God. And like, and it happens repeatedly. Like every time I have a meeting with them, every time I'll see them, I'll learn something new. But it's not just learning something new, it's like it's a whole different way of seeing the world. And when you see that, like, man, you see this in a totally different way, like that's usually I've realized like when I'll be like, yep, let's go.
Yeah, I'm in.
And part of it is, some of it is pragmatic where it's like, because I almost exclusively invest if I can be strategic. Like if I can actually, I want to work with you. And I joke around, but it's not a joke, but it is sort of a joke. It's not. I'm just like, yeah, I sort of invest just to go hang out with like smart people and help solve problems with them. Like that's that's what I love about it. And I love being able to like do that. And so like, if I'm investing, I want to help you with this problem. I want to provide value to you. And so the lifetime, 10 years, 15 years, like I have to want to be able, I have to want to hang out with you and talk with you for 10 years.
Yeah.
And so like that is what drives a lot of it. On a more pragmatic, the other thing with that though is I realized like that doesn't, it's not that it doesn't scale, but the percentage rates of that are seriously like 0.5%, less than that. Like out of 200 to 300 founders, it's like one will like have that.
Yeah.
And so like that works for my personal investment sort of choices. Working with a numerator has to be higher. Not that it has to be higher, but like you're just working at like with more.
No, you need enough shots on goal.
Yes, maybe, yeah.
Even with that 1 out of 200, 300 people that like is in awe, the business might not work out.
Yes.
There's so many other things, right? So you've got to, increase your shots on goal.
Exactly. Yes. And like widening the filter, not to like dilute it, but just like making it not as you said, to have more shots on goal. I tend to look for how do people think across a wide range of topics. And I think, and I've explored like how much of this is my own bias because I like to think in a multidisciplinary way.
Yeah.
And so like when I see someone thinking about all the problems of their business or their product in a really insightful, effective way, it doesn't have to be like purely intelligent, but just really like, wow, like that's really good thinking on this topic. Awesome. That's something else I look for. I tend to be, and this has just come from my both professional and personal life, just dealing with personality types. Being a good this sounds like very like,
No
eat, pray, love. Yes, basically, yes. Like, I mean,
don't be an asshole.
Yeah.
It's a rule I always make at the hackathons. Don't be an asshole.
Yeah. Because like,
if you need to ask questions about what that means, like
you were in the wrong room.
Path.
Yes.
Like, yeah.
Exactly. Yes. And it's just like, I used to actually, when I was talking about interviewing, like helping to set up the interviews for Uber, and we were sort of informally doing this. One of the things that we were running into all the time is that like some of the smartest coders and people in the world are just like on the streets of San Francisco. We'd have people come in and they would just destroy the interviews. I mean, just totally ace it from a technical standpoint. I mean, just monsters at it. And no one wanted to be in a room with them. Yeah. And we get into the debrief and everyone would be like, well, we got to get them in the four walls of Uber. Like, we got to have them in our company. And I'd be like, no, we don't. This is the kind of person that like, they come in and within 6 months, any team that they touch has completely melted down. These are the kind of people that like when they come in, no one wants to go in a meeting with them. No one wants to work on a project with them. So they end up within 2 years, they're in a corner coding some masterpiece that no one even knows anymore. Yeah. And so like just from standpoint, like, A, do I want to work with that person? But then B, like, this is a founder that has to go hire over the course of the next 10 years, like thousands of people, hopefully. How many times is that company gonna go through like some dysfunction, some like New York Times front? I've also lived through this where
Yeah.
like I've been at companies on the front page of the New York Times because of like stuff like this. And so I'm very sensitive to like no asshole founders.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good framework. Let's move into the rapid fire. So I'm gonna just hit you with some questions, and you go ahead and answer them however you are. My laptop's dead, so I remember.
Okay.
No, I remember them. So first question would be, how do you stay sharp? Right? AI technology is moving fast. You clearly have a bunch of interests outside of technology in terms of like psychology and game theory and economics. Like, what do you do to stay on the bleeding edge of new things?
So I read a lot. My apartment's filled with books, just all over the place, most of which I've not read. um, Constantly reading Reddit. I'm reading a lot of like random sources of news and information all the time. So like newsletters, Substack, all the time across like a multitude of domains. So AI, foreign policy, world news, behavior economics, psychology. I mean, all of it. Um, I still code to some degree. And it's funny, I no longer find myself coding as much. I find myself working with tools, like understanding tooling. Um, I'm not coding as much as I was, like I'd say like a year and a half ago. Yeah, I'd say those are the two main things. And then honestly, actually being in a room with like you and the team and Perna and Tyler and the other like people here, like this has been such an expansion of mind. I love moment. You don't get these. You get these like maybe 5 to 7 times in your life.
The team here is crazy.
Yes.
Everyone here is so exceptionally good.
Yeah.
I'm really grateful.
But also good people.
Yeah, for sure.
And you know, like a good like example of a good like way that I see this, and it's reminded me of my earlier days at Uber, is a sign of like something like this is when like you find yourself every day looking at someone speaking in your team and you're just like looking at them like, oh shit, I'm just like looking at you explain this and I'm just like, I've never thought of that. Or like I so appreciate that like what you're saying. Like I'm learning, like literally as you're like talking to the other person or as you're explaining something, I'm just watching you and learning. And I realized how much I had lost that, especially I think as you go higher in your career, you are often no longer in rooms where anything is new. You're answering questions instead of asking them.
Yeah.
And you just get to this place where like you don't have that like learning, that wonder, that like that curiosity is no longer being fed. And now that I have that again, like my brain is exploded again. And I love that. Just yeah. So that's also how I stay sharp is yeah.
Surround yourself with smart.
Surround yourself with smart people doing things that you don't understand.
Yeah. So on the note of like reading a lot of books, what's a book, podcast, like some sort of media that has really kind of helped shape or inform how you live in the world or go about life?
Yeah. So book, it always comes up and I'm like, it's funny because I never would have thought this would be the one, but I always end up referencing it. But Creativity Inc. by Ed Catmull, the guy that leads Pixar. It's a story of how they basically achieve excellence. It's a story of how they were created, but also how they achieve excellence and like and it's out there and people I won't go into like the details of the book, but like it stayed with me and resonates with me so much because they have this sort of ruthless but like achievable, but also not normal approach to like ensuring that like excellence is delivered and that like they think differently and think new. And but it also very much encompasses, like my favorite chapter from that is just like, he talks to people about like, how do you do something that like, how do you get people to help you build something that like, you don't know what you're building? It's just like every day you just keep saying like, here's the ultimate goal. And then like every day we'll just solve the problems as they come along. Anyway, that's the book. Podcast, I'd probably say like Hidden Brain, it's behavior economics podcast. And then there's also just my behavior economics library of books that like really deeply influenced a lot of my thinking of the world.
Nice. If you had to put like a few words or a phrase on your personal mug, you know this mug. This
Yes.
is one of my prized possessions, my Jake mug. Like what would go on the rig?
I contain multitudes.
I contain multitudes.
Multitudes, yeah. It's a poem. But I always love that like phrase.
Nice.
Because I feel like that's so much of what my life has been, is just sort of embracing all these different things and letting them come together in key moments in your life.
Trust yourself.
Yeah.
And then last rapid fire question, but what's a common misconception about AI that people have that you think is just totally wrong?
I mean, I think there's the obvious one, which is where we are now. Like the things that are happening now, like, oh, like there's so much cynicism and dubiousness about like, oh, like this will never be what we think it will be. Like it'll never take over coding, or it'll never be general intelligence, or it'll never get to whatever heights that, you know, people say. And I think that like, I feel like technologists, people that work in technology, have always just been like, well, no technology has ever comes out fully baked. Like it's always growing and evolving. So I feel like that's the obvious one, is that like it is gonna be humanity changing. I don't think it might not look however we're predicting it to, but like you can clearly see that it is going to change the world.
The misconception is that it's not going to change pretty much everything.
Yes. I mean, I think it's a misconception among some people, not everyone, but some people, there's just a lot of like
skepticism.
Yeah. And I think that's the obvious one. I think that like, I guess it is a misconception. I would always get, and I still do, I would always get like peeved when people, I think many people have this sense that AI just started 3 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, you all know it's as a intellectual pursuit, it's been around for like 70 years.
Yeah.
In theory, like the theory of it.
Yeah.
Like I took an AI.
Came about from Alan Turing.
Yes, exactly.
Who created the first modern computer.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so like, it's been around for decades. It's been in our lives in production for 20 years-ish.
Yeah.
And so people, like the idea of like, oh, like this is the totality of what we have and what we built. And I'm like, no, there's so much other stuff. Also, I think this is also, this goes back to, this is another misconception, I think, that it will have to look like what we've just built in the last 3 years, that like it'll be based on transformers, that like whatever the holy grail that is to come will have to be based on transformers or the recent technology. I'm just like, well, no, it might not look like that. Like this is just one step. Like at one point we were computer vision. At one point it was just like, it was linear. I mean, that's not really AI, but like we've been through so many steps of this. And who knows what the next sort of like step change will be. But the total of it, artificial intelligence, as we've known it for 7 years, like we will keep marching towards whatever holy grail we're going to get to.
One thing that I've like gained a new appreciation for through like just doing this podcast and even building things myself is just how much easier it is today.
Yeah.
Right? Like 10 years ago, none of this infrastructure existed. You couldn't just go spin up a new cluster on AWS to expand your server capacity.
Yeah.
And like, that's 10 years.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of mind blowing to think about what 10 years from now is going to be.
And things move faster. I mean, the rate of change always speeds up
Yeah.
for technology. Like
Mhm.
that's just sort of a fundamental rule of technology. And so like it's not that amount of change will take 4 years or 5 years or
Yeah.
2 years.
So crazy times. Rick, for anyone that wants to keep up with you, follow you, reach out, what's the best way to find you? LinkedIn, X, Twitter?
LinkedIn.
Okay.
It's just Kinetic Rick or just search for Rick Boone. Then I have a website, which is my name with a dot between the two O's. So it's rickbo.one.
Nice.
And from there,
Good domain.
Thank you. When I thought, I was like, oh, this is amazing. I actually almost did it because I was like,
I
people
got
are confused.
jacoshay.com for $12 a year for like 6 years locked down. So I'm
Nice.
very happy about that. Yeah.
That's pretty good, dude.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Cool. So that, and then I guess what's got you excited? What are you looking forward to over the next 6 months, 1 year?
This is gonna sound funny, but I swear this is true. Honestly, this work here, the next 2 residencies, and just continue to work with the founders and learning here. Like I'm going traveling for a few weeks. I'm leaving in 2 days. And I seriously have considered, I'm just like, am I gonna miss this so much that I feel like there's a non-zero chance I like cut my trip short because I'm just like, I just want to be back.
It's not even the busy season.
I know, like last week it was like there were a number of people here in the office, and I just was like, travel has always been my sort of thrill space, like where I grow and I just love going to new places and exploring. And I was like, this might overtake that. Like I might want this so much that I might like cut that short. But honestly, that's like what I'm looking forward to the most is just like the stuff here.
Nice. Well, for any founders out there, if you want to work with Rick, if you want to work with myself, reach out to Rick on LinkedIn, apply for Antler. I'm sure there will be a link in the bio. I'm recording this before I've set up any summaries or anything like that, but I'm sure we'll have some like special link for folks to click. Rick, this was awesome. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you so much, Jake. This is awesome.